U.S. markets plunged today in the wake of President Trump's announcement of new tariffs.
A look at the markets just minutes after the opening bell this morning as Wall Street reacts.
Says Wall Street reacted with fear and pessimism.
Many stocks had their worst single day since the pandemic.
In a move that's sending shockwaves through the global economy, President Donald Trump has unleashed a barrage of sweeping tariffs, igniting fears of a full-blown trade war and plunging financial markets into chaos. The Dow Jones Industrial Average has plummeted over 1,600 points, the most significant drop since the tumultuous days of 2020, wiping out trillions in market value. As the world watches in stunned disbelief, the pressing question looms: is the United States barreling toward economic upheaval under Trump's aggressive trade policies? On April 2, 2025, President Trump stood defiantly in the White House Rose Garden to announce the implementation of extensive tariffs on imports from around the globe. Labeling it Liberation Day, he declared this move as America's declaration of economic independence, aiming to rectify what he perceives as decades of unfair trade practices that have disadvantaged American workers and industries. The tariffs include a minimum 10% levy on all imports, with certain countries, notably China and members of the European Union, facing rates as high as 50%. Trump asserted that these measures would rejuvenate domestic manufacturing and create millions of jobs, stating, "We're going to start being smart, and we're going to start being very wealthy again." The immediate aftermath of this announcement was nothing short of catastrophic for financial markets. The Dow Jones Industrial Average nosedived over 1,600 points, leading a global sell-off reminiscent of the economic shocks experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic. Investors scrambled to offload stocks amid mounting fears that escalating trade tensions could thrust the U.S. and other major economies into recession. The International Monetary Fund issued a stark warning about the severe risks these tariffs pose to global economic growth. International leaders reacted with swift condemnation. Germany's chancellor labeled the tariffs as protectionism at its worst, while Chinese officials vowed to take necessary countermeasures to safeguard their economic interests. The European Union hinted at imposing retaliatory tariffs, targeting iconic American products in a tit-for-tat escalation. As tensions mount, the specter of a global trade war looms large, with potential ramifications for international alliances and economic stability. Domestically, the political landscape is equally tumultuous. The Senate has initiated debate on President Trump's ambitious package of tax breaks and spending cuts, a cornerstone of the Republican legislative agenda. The bill seeks to make permanent the expiring tax cuts from Trump's first term and proposes additional reductions on tipped wages and Social Security income. It also allocates $175 billion to support Trump's mass deportation plans and increases Pentagon funding. However, concerns over financing persist, with proposed spending cuts amounting to only about $4 billion compared to the anticipated $4 trillion cost. Democrats have voiced staunch opposition, criticizing the bill for favoring the wealthy and threatening essential public services. In a parallel development, President Trump has dismissed several National Security Council officials following a meeting with far-right activist Laura Loomer, who raised concerns about staff loyalty to the Make America Great Again agenda. Among those reportedly dismissed were senior NSC figures Brian Walsh, Thomas Boudry, and David Feith. This move has sparked criticism and raised questions about the politicization of national security roles within the administration. Amid these upheavals, President Trump has maintained an optimistic stance. Speaking aboard Air Force One en route to a golf tournament in Florida, he downplayed the market turmoil, stating, "I think it's going very well. The markets are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom." He likened the tariffs to a necessary medical operation, suggesting that short-term pain would lead to long-term gain. However, economists and market analysts remain skeptical, warning that the tariffs could lead to increased consumer prices, disrupted supply chains, and retaliatory measures from trading partners. As the administration forges ahead with its aggressive trade policies, the nation stands at a crossroads. Supporters argue that these measures are long overdue corrections to unfair trade practices that have hollowed out American manufacturing. Critics, however, fear that the tariffs will provoke retaliatory actions, harm consumers, and destabilize the global economy. The coming weeks and months will be crucial in determining whether Trump's gamble will pay off or plunge the nation into economic uncertainty. What are your thoughts on President Trump's sweeping tariffs and their potential impact on the economy? Do you believe this strategy will lead to prosperity or peril? Share your opinions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth analysis of the latest political developments.
April 2nd comes, that'll be reciprocal tariffs.
We have to do something. Trade is not fair.
Our country's businesses back that left us.
April 2nd, 2025. A seismic shock has just rocked the global economy. President Donald Trump has declared it Liberation Day, not for freedom from tyranny, but for freedom from foreign trade. In a fiery Rose Garden speech, Trump unveiled a sweeping new tariff plan that could explode international relations, redefine U.S. trade policy, and spark a global economic war. But is this a historic economic revolution, or a reckless gamble with devastating consequences? Let's break down what just happened, who's cheering, who's panicking, and why this could be the most explosive economic maneuver in modern history. At 11 a.m. Eastern on April 2nd, 2025, President Trump stood before the nation and announced what he called a declaration of economic independence. He invoked a new era of American self-reliance, slamming decades of what he called one-sided trade deals that benefited foreign powers at the expense of U.S. workers. Trump's new tariff policy is twofold. First, a universal 10% tariff on all imports starting April 5th. Second, a reciprocal tariff system that matches and in some cases exceeds the tariff rates other nations impose on U.S. goods. That means China, for example, will now face a 54% total tariff on its exports to America. Europe, 20%, India, 26%, and effective immediately, all foreign cars are hit with a crushing 25% tariff. Trump declared, "This is about respect. This is about fairness. And this is about putting America first, again." Supporters of the move, including the United Auto Workers and several conservative think tanks, are celebrating it as long overdue economic justice. They argue these tariffs will revive American manufacturing, protect jobs, and restore national pride. Trump himself claimed the tariffs will generate trillions and trillions of dollars that will go toward tax cuts and paying down the national debt. But critics are sounding the alarm. As of April 2nd, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has already denounced the move, calling it a massive tax on American consumers. Economists warn this will drive up prices across the board, from smartphones to sneakers to meat and cars. Internationally, the backlash was swift. The European Union hinted at retaliatory tariffs within hours. Canada and Mexico, currently exempted, say their patience is wearing thin. Even Australia, a traditional U.S. ally, blasted the 10% tariff on its beef exports as an economic slap in the face. Meanwhile, Wall Street didn't wait to react. By the afternoon of April 2nd, the Dow Jones fell over 800 points, tech stocks plunged, and investors scrambled to brace for global instability. This is more than just an economic policy. It's a political sledgehammer aimed at Trump's 2024 campaign promise to rebuild America's industrial heartland. But is it smart economics? Or economic nationalism gone rogue? On one hand, the tariffs may pressure countries like China to play fairer in trade negotiations. They might give U.S. manufacturers a much-needed edge against cheap imports. Supporters argue that it's finally time to stop letting America be the world's economic doormat. But on the other hand, higher prices for American consumers are all but guaranteed. Imported cars, electronics, and even grocery items are expected to spike in cost. Small businesses that rely on global supply chains could be crushed, and the threat of a full-scale trade war, with tit-for-tat retaliations from Europe, Asia, and Latin America, is no longer hypothetical. It's imminent. The strategy is high risk, high reward. But with the global economy already fragile in the wake of inflation battles and post-pandemic disruptions, many fear this could be the match that lights a worldwide fire. So here's the billion-dollar question. Is Trump's Liberation Day the beginning of a powerful American comeback, or the opening shot of a global economic meltdown? Will this bring jobs back to Detroit, or inflation to your doorstep? We want to hear from you. Do you believe these tariffs are a bold step toward economic justice, or a dangerous detour toward isolation and instability? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more breakdowns of the power moves, political battles, and global trends shaping our future. Because this isn't just economics, this is war, and it's only just begun.
The president singled out Australia during his Rose Garden event.
The unilateral action that the Trump administration has taken today, this is not the act of a friend.
An island with no people, no trade, no ports, and still, it's on Donald Trump's new tariff list. In a twist that's leaving even seasoned diplomats speechless, the Trump campaign has announced sweeping tariffs against a pair of uninhabited volcanic islands in the middle of the Southern Ocean. Yes, the Heard and McDonald Islands, desolate, frozen, and about as far from trade disputes as anything on Earth, are now caught in a geopolitical showdown. So what's the game here? Is this a bureaucratic blunder or a cold, calculated message to America's allies? As of April 2, 2025, the Trump campaign unveiled a bold new round of proposed tariffs aimed at defending American industry and sovereignty. Most of the attention quickly zeroed in on the usual targets: China, Mexico, and Australia. But buried in the fine print was something bizarre: the inclusion of Australia's external territories, specifically the Heard and McDonald Islands. These icy outposts lie over 2,000 miles southwest of Perth and are governed by Australia as a nature reserve. They are uninhabited by humans, visited only occasionally by scientists, and are more notable for penguins than politics. So, how did they wind up on a tariff list alongside major global economies? The Trump team's official explanation is simple, or maybe too simple. A campaign spokesperson told Wired that the islands are Australian territory and therefore subject to the same trade considerations. No further comment, no rationale about actual trade flows, because there aren't any. Critics quickly pounced, calling the move symbolic nonsense and a self-parody of economic policy. The islands, after all, don't produce goods, don't export products, and don't even have a population. One online commentator mocked, "Are we trying to sanction penguins now?" But the implications go deeper. Supporters of Trump's approach argue this is exactly the point, that no one is exempt, not even the most remote territory, if they fall under a nation deemed unfair to American trade interests. They see it as a way of drawing a hard line with Australia, which has recently shifted closer to China in several key trade and defense agreements. On the other hand, Australia's response was swift and biting. In a press conference on April 3rd, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese didn't hold back. "Nowhere on earth is safe from this administration's economic chaos," he said, adding that if the U.S. wants a trade war over ghost islands, they might just be fighting themselves. The international reaction hasn't been kind either. Headlines around the world have mocked the move, with the Sydney Morning Herald calling it peak tariff theater. Even allies in Europe are watching nervously, wondering if their own obscure territories might be next. So let's ask the obvious. Why include the Heard and McDonald Islands? One theory is bureaucratic overreach, a legal team casting too wide a net. Another is symbolic overkill. Trump is sending a loud, aggressive signal that no country, no territory, no inch of perceived unfairness will escape his trade hammer. But here's the danger. In appearing too aggressive, the strategy may backfire. By targeting meaningless regions, critics argue Trump undermines the seriousness of his broader trade policy. It looks petty. It opens the U.S. to ridicule. And it gives ammunition to opponents who say this campaign is running more on chaos than coherence. Meanwhile, businesses in both the U.S. and Australia are left guessing. If even ghost islands aren't safe, what does that mean for sectors like mining, tech, or agriculture, which rely on real imports and exports? Worse yet, what message does this send to smaller allied nations? That their territories, however remote or symbolic, are now pawns in America's trade chessboard. Whether this move was a calculated message or a farcical oversight, one thing is clear. Trump's new tariff strategy is turning heads, and not always in the way his campaign might want. So what do you think? Is this an example of strategic toughness, or has the Trump campaign officially jumped the shark by slapping sanctions on uninhabited islands? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more sharp breakdowns of the world's wildest political moves. This is just the beginning.
The president will announce sweeping global tariffs
from President Trump's tariffs.
His trade war with new tariffs
on products imported to the United States.
China, first row. China, 67%. That's tariffs.
America just declared economic war. In a move that stunned allies and enraged global markets, Donald Trump proclaimed April 2nd as Liberation Day, a dramatic new chapter in his fight for economic independence. But is this bold act of defiance the path to American prosperity, or the spark of a global trade meltdown? As of April 2nd, 2025, the world's economic order has been shaken, and the consequences are already rippling across continents. In a fiery declaration broadcast from the White House, Donald Trump unveiled sweeping new tariffs that instantly reshaped U.S. trade policy. The headline measure: a massive 34% tariff on all Chinese imports, alongside a 20% levy on goods from the European Union. But it didn't stop there. A blanket 10% tariff now applies to nearly all imports, regardless of origin. Trump justified the action by invoking the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act, allowing him to bypass Congress altogether by framing foreign trade as a national security threat. The era of one-sided deals is over, Trump declared, vowing to impose reciprocal tariffs that mirror those charged by other nations. Supporters are calling this the dawn of a new era, a long overdue push for domestic manufacturing. But critics say this is pure chaos, a dangerous escalation that could unravel decades of global trade cooperation. Trump's move is being framed by the administration as an act of economic patriotism. Officials claim the new tariffs will raise hundreds of billions in revenue, protect American industries, and reduce dependency on adversarial nations. "We're taking back control," Trump stated on Tuesday morning. "This is economic liberation." But markets weren't cheering. Within hours of the announcement, the Dow Jones dropped over 700 points. Consumer goods companies warned of sharp price hikes. Economists projected that the average U.S. tariff rate would jump to 22%, a level not seen since the 1930s. The backlash from abroad was just as fierce. Brazil's Congress passed emergency counter-tariffs within hours. The EU, China, and Canada all released coordinated statements blasting the decision as reckless and a threat to global stability. The United Kingdom, once Trump's closest ally, issued a carefully worded response, expressing disappointment and warning that ongoing free trade negotiations could be frozen. Meanwhile, New Zealand and Australia, both countries that run trade surpluses with the U.S., rejected the premise entirely, labeling it economic nationalism disguised as security. Even in Washington, the resistance was swift. On April 2nd, the U.S. Senate passed a bipartisan resolution to block tariffs on Canadian imports, seeking to overturn the president's emergency declaration. The vote passed narrowly, 51-48, with 4 Republican senators breaking ranks. While the resolution is expected to stall in the GOP-controlled House, the message is clear. Not all Republicans are standing behind Trump's trade blitzkrieg. This is more than just a trade policy shift. It's a test of Trump's enduring grip on American politics and a gamble on nationalist economics in an increasingly globalized world. Supporters argue that these tariffs are long overdue. They believe America has been exploited for decades by nations with unfair trade practices, and that Trump is finally enforcing balance. "Foreign countries have used us as their piggy bank," one Trump advisor said. "Those days are over." But critics see a different picture, one where prices skyrocket, jobs are lost in export sectors, and supply chains are thrown into disarray. Economists warn that retaliatory tariffs could devastate American agriculture, tech, and auto industries. Inflation, already a concern, could spike again. And politically, this hardline move could either reignite Trump's populist base or deepen divisions within the GOP. As 2026 midterms approach, will Republican lawmakers stick with Trump's America First economic warfare? Or will they face backlash from voters paying more for everything from groceries to gasoline? What happens next could reshape global power balances for decades. Is Trump's Liberation Day the start of an economic revival or the beginning of a dangerous isolationist spiral? Let us know in the comments. Do these tariffs make America stronger, or are we risking a new Great Depression? And if you want more bold, no BS breakdowns of global power plays, hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to turn on notifications. This economic storm is just getting started.